Hello and welcome to Reaching for the Moon, presented by Everglades Moon Local Council, Florida chapter of Covenant of the Goddess. COG supports individual works by its covens, members, and local councils. It's a vibrant network of a myriad of Wiccan and witchy resources, religious support, friendships, service opportunities, and more. To find out more, visit our website, emlc.net, our Facebook page, facebook.com/EvergladesMoon, or Twitter, @EMLCTweets.
Hello, witches, and welcome to episode number 43, which is a bonus episode for May 2018. Yep, we've got another great workshop coming to you, and so we saved it for the bonus. We're going to start off with a song. Actually, both songs in this episode are going to be by Mama Gina, so I'll go ahead and introduce them now. The first song by Mama Gina is going to be Ravens of the Nine Worlds, and it's from her album Solitaire. And then at the end, to take us out, we're going to have Mama Gina sharing with us a song from her new album, Nine Toes the Bard, and some of us have heard this before, but it's a favorite, Paladin Shmaladin. And yeah, you'll get it when you hear the song. You can learn more about Mama Gina and purchase her music at mamaginamusic.com. And now on to the workshop. This is one that was presented at a prior Equinox in the Oaks by our very own Canu. It's called Ancestry and the Land. And I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. Blessed be.
Ebon wings are chasing me down highway and back road, and even when I stop to get my fill, they are perched upon the neon, daring me ignore the sign upon the sign, if you will, the sign upon the sign, if you will. Black wings, they go chasing, one goes left and one goes right, and I feel their wicked talons on my skin. I have named them Rock and Hard Place, and they cry with all they know, and I'm dizzy as I let it all sink in. I'm dizzy as I let it all sink in. Ravens of the nine worlds, come whisper in my ear, and I will listen like the very gods of old. You are my thought and my desire, you're the lyric and the chord, and between the two is where the song will go. So bring me every dead thing, bring me every seed, bring me all that lives and all that dies. Tell me all I need to know and just a little more, and I'll release you to the sky. Oh, my pretty ravens, you must fly. Ravens of the nine worlds, come whisper in my ear, and I will listen like the very gods of old. You are my thought and my desire, you're the lyric and the chord, and between the two is where the song will grow. Sometimes their gifts are dark and sweet, sometimes it's bright as fire. Sometimes those ravens, they make me laugh, and as they circle higher, higher, sometimes they leave me for far too long, and I fear they will not return. Raven halves of mine own soul, to me with every word. Bring me every every dead thing. Bring me every seed. Bring me all that lives and all that dies. Tell me all I need to know and just a little more. And I'll release you to the sky. Oh, my precious ravens, you must fly. Ravens of the 9 worlds, come whisper in my ear, and I will listen like the very gods of old. You are my thought and my desire. You're the lyric and the chord, and between the two is where the song will grow. Between the two is where my soul will grow. Between the two is where my song will grow.
Welcome to the last workshop of Equinox in the Oak.
Woo!
We've been wet and we've been sweaty and we've had magic and all kinds of fun visiting. So to wrap up at least our workshops, we've scheduled a workshop called Ancestry in the Land, growing our self, our place, and our purpose. And the things that this really concerns has to do with how our own physical ancestry and more than our magical lineage or our chosen family relate to our development and how interconnected that is with the land that we live on or come from. So the basics of this really start out with kind of who we are in a kind of a bloodline way. Although some of us, even on one side of my family, I don't know too much about it. But for me, I know that my dad's family has been in coastal South Carolina for over 200 years. They would say that anybody with sense or money lived inland in Conway where you could farm, because the coastal areas at that time were not really tourist destinations or valued economically in almost any way. They were really pretty marginal areas. And one of the things for me that means so too is that both in terms of economics and nutrition and physical place, my father's line has many years of living in a somewhat fragile and liminal state, both. They're at the confluence of the land and the ocean, and where they lived for much of that time had an area behind the main dune line where a small river runs out and through the dunes to the ocean called Wither's Swash. And I remember that going right behind my grandma's property when I'd visit her when I was young. I didn't really know too much about it, but it's a deep channel, Swash. If you fall in there, it's hard to picture climbing out at almost any point because it's a deep cut. Oh. And as Myrtle Beach developed, they actually brought Wither's Swash under the main roadways and under a whole amusement park pavilion that was built, and it still exits out to the ocean though. So as you go down along the sand, you can actually see where the swash comes out still, and a lot of people go there to play in the water right at that spot because there's super powerful currents sometimes going in or out since it's tidally influenced. On my mother's side, we don't know. Well, on my dad's side, still for a moment. Our last name is Owens, and it's a very Welsh name. The first time I went to Wales, and we dropped in at this little bed and breakfast. I was kind of a youngster at the time in junior high school, and I asked the woman who ran the B&B if she could get me a phone book. And she was really cute, you know. She said, "Could I do you want to ring someone up?" And I said, no, I just want to look at something. And she said, okay. And she brought me this phone book, you know, that had maybe 90 pages in it for the town. And there were 60 pages for the town, and there were 9 pages of Owen and Owen's surnames. And I'd already sensed driving into Wales, it's just like there's times when when you're at a place that really has a feeling for you or you for it. Mm-hmm. And every time I went back to Wales too, I don't know how much you can say this was based on the preconditioning of an expectation about it, but those hills felt really kind of interesting and familiar. Like they knew who I was and that I should know who they are. And even though I didn't in any active sense of being born and raised and having been there before, I visited a few times, I really had a pretty visceral body sense of it's comfortable to be here. I didn't necessarily know what I was looking at, but it felt a little bit like I did. And that was pretty striking, On my mom's side, we know that her families are English and German, but she doesn't have much of an interest in genealogy, and we've developed it a little bit. My dad has an interest in genealogy and really worked on his side of the family a fair amount, so we know quite a bit about that, but we don't on my mom, so it's a little more of a mystery to be unveiled, but based on what we can know, and we got my dad a genetics test for a birthday quite a while ago. We look pretty solidly like Celtic European. My dad is a little bit of a heavyset guy with a really round face and a pretty flat nose and stuff. And he kept thinking, South Carolina for over 200 years during a time when they were poor whites, there must be African American or African in some way in his background. And there may be. It didn't show up in the genetics tests that he was able to take, at least. So I kind of find my own ancestral line to be centered in Central Europe quite a bit, although those areas interacted with Northern Europe a lot too, and some Celtic background, and who knows what that means coming across parts of Europe and Spain and over in France and then. But that's a little bit about kind of the things that grew me, right? And for each of us, whether we know what those lines are explicitly or not, there is, just literally millions of years of human development that have grown us in a really fundamental sense. There's very few things about your body that were alive when you were born. As beings, we really have this upwelling of renewal that goes on constantly, from the blood that's made in our marrow to the types of flora and fauna that inhabit us as we go around places and eat the foods or acquire the sicknesses and sometimes the resistances as we go, and breathe the air and walk on the land, and there's things that our feet come into contact with that are inherent things about the place we're at. And when we've spent a fair amount of time in a place, that connection deepens and deepens. So it's something that you can work with, too. For me, even though I've only ever lived a short period of time in that area of South Carolina, it's really easy for me to feel that sense of place or that spirit of the land when I go there. And every time I go, it seems to deepen a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. And while I don't indulge too much in some of the, what might be ancestral foods of that area, like a RC cola and a moon pie or something, there's some of it that...
Good stuff, yeah.
I know, but there's things about how I make my body out of that place too that I want to be careful about. So I'll give them some honor. I've had some of those.
Well, there's there's a huge Owens pottery in South Carolina too. There's a large pottery making area, and I have some Owens pottery, as a matter of fact, when we went there, and we bought some. Yeah, at least one of our older ancestors on my dad's side was living up in North Carolina, but a lot of them pretty much were centered really, really heavily in coastal South Carolina. My brothers and I used to like to body surf in the Atlantic when we'd go up there because it was a lot of action and a lot of fun to do. And we met a kid out there at one point, and it took less than 15 minutes from meeting him to know that he was local and finding out that we're probably related because his family name is one that comes up as part of the marriages that my family's had over time. That so it's really interesting that even though
at that point in my life, I never lived in that place. I only ever visited family there. You can find connections to people really quickly from family lines that may exist in a place. And for me, that was true too. So for me, part of what the connection between Ancestry and the lands that I've been in have meant, besides that sense of familiarity and really having a sense of what the spirit of the land there is about, is when I was trying to decide, well, what's my purpose? I got up through college and studied interesting things and explored, what I could learn and what I could express, and I still came out of college kind of going, a lot of things I could do, but I didn't really have a grounded sense of, well, what should I do, right? And that's a harder question to plumb. But I think I realized that some of the things that I came up with in growing up, one of the things my dad really impressed on me was that importance of family. And one of the projects that my cousin was doing along with my dad was helping kind of reassemble some of the land that the family had owned where he had grown up. His dad had to sell a bunch of land off in the Depression just to kind of get by, and so some of the ancestors then of us had not much, but a little strip of land that became Owens Drive. So one of the early pictures I have with my older son the first time we went is holding him up in my arms with the little street sign there. And when I thought about it, I thought, the endeavors that I was doing academically included learning a little bit about law and a lot about language, linguistics. And my interests in linguistics were kind of big picture stuff. How does language express power? How does it influence people's lives? So it wasn't so much about the kind of micro level of what's the smallest piece of sound that has meaning, why do babies, say something like ma or mother, when that was some of their first things almost cross-culturally. I really was looking at, how do people understand each other? And, how do they adult well, and how can we manage to have this kind of constructed reality work? And because we know it does, how are we subject to real expressions of influence and power by other people from it? And that's kind of what led me to look at, religion and politics and law are three big areas where that all exists. And I kind of taken an interest in the law as an undergrad and studied it some. So even though I was getting out of college without really knowing, well, where am I going? What is it I want to do? I kind of knew that that sense of purpose for me should relate to some of the things that I feel well grounded in already as a person. And I can recall thinking, I really liked camping as a kid. I really liked the fact that my dad valued the place he grew up in ways that weren't related to whether or not it was economically successful, because it wasn't. It was a hard place to live. They stayed there. It may have been the only place it could have been economically, but that's where some of my bloodline has its root. Some of the values I took away from my dad in that regard really had to do with the fact that he did have a sense of place and did have a sense of purpose, or related for him to family a lot. And while I also kind of inherited some of that, his sense of place really moved me, and the experiences that they took me to go out camping. One of the things when I looked around and said, what is it that I could do with these skills? Some interest in law, but boy, lawyers have a terrible reputation.
Yeah, they do.
And it's not necessarily an easy field to go into. And I would be accepting quite a bit of almost perspective that my purpose in life is something that people view pretty pejoratively. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of a weighty thing to think about, I thought that really, for me, environmental law was something that I knew that I could wake up in the morning and think, this is something worth going to do. Mm-hmm. If I was careful about who I got employed by, could have a discipline about who my clients might be in some sense, that I would probably think I could keep getting up and doing that a lot of days, and that it really did relate to the things that I came up with that helped form my own sense of self, who I was, where I was from, what was important about it. It still feels weird to me in Myrtle Beach that they put roadway and amusement park over part of that Wither Swash area where my family lived. It goes out to the ocean through the dune system. Because
it's paved?
Yeah, they actually built over it physically. And luckily the area where my family's place is, it's still not covered over or anything like that. It's just the development strip out by the ocean, and it still goes out to the ocean, luckily. They didn't try and cut it off or do anything terrible that would really end up killing the swash as a ecological area or things like that. But, when I go down there, it's still really weird to be at the end of it and be like, under there. Wow. Natural underground rivers are pretty cool. Man-made ones, a little strange, I think. But environmental law became something that I thought I could do, and while it took years, growing my own sense of purpose involved making the decision, taking law school entrance exams, trying to find a program that I thought would prepare me to do it professionally, taking the biggest financial risk of my life by going to law school and doing it all on loans that, are still part of what I have to pay back from the effort I do, because I never went into saying, okay, I'm going to do 5 years and make money and don't care what I do, because I couldn't do that. That wasn't going to be me. So it became a part of a very long-term kind of plan for what is it that I want to do. And it helps me even when, there's times when employment is rough and bosses or supervisors or coworkers are going to be terrible people to work with somehow. And sometimes you don't have a good choice about it, about how to move them away from you or protect yourself particularly. So having a sense of why I'm there and what I'm doing really gives a strong grounding. And it isn't just because it's environmental and I'm pagan, although that's a great confluence of kind of purpose and interest for me that even intellectually developed before I was involved in paganism at a level I was kind of already on this linguistics path and stuff and starting to look at law possibly. So in some ways I could view it as a happy coincidence. But what I really know is that I took some time when I didn't know what I wanted to do to let things settle, to try and get some perspective, and to see, well, what should be up for me? What will I grow out of this? And so the sense of land, the sense of self, and the development, giving the time for that sense of purpose to be a little clearer, really helped me. And I think it's something that could be done at any stage. Right? A lot of people would say, oh, you got out of college, you didn't really do anything then. Oh, no. And it's easy for me to have thought, was that worth it? What am I doing? But for some reason I had a little bit of patience and, found a way to resolve some of the things that were coming up as I graduated. My little brother passed away, had helped deal with his estate and stuff. And then moved to a new place with some people I knew from college and who also had some similar interests in what were they going to do? Where were they going next? And one good friend of mine and I each set our path toward a different purpose in law, and we each actually got there. Did the programs we wanted to do, got employment in the kind of things we wanted to pursue. And I think we're both really, rewarded by that over time. That feedback is really important. And I've had a few ancestors come forward in work that I've done that are glad about it. They didn't necessarily say, you're fulfilling my purpose, or it's been a part of our family line, but, to feel like there's some level of support for the decisions we're making and the ways in which we're conducting our lives, really, I think, is a part of that well-integrated sense of, what are you on about here? Right? How does it relate? And it's not only bloodline, I think, where that comes up. My father-in-law, when I first told him I was thinking about going to law school, he's a freelance journalist, and said, why the hell would you want to do that? But he and I made a good peace about it. Eventually, it didn't take all that long. I told him I wanted to do environmental law, I thought, or I might, when I knew that that's what I wanted to do. And he got real settled about that. He did some columns on local waters and fishing and things like that. He had, I think, a real deep sense of place himself. And I think that led him to be able to help respect the decision that I was trying to make and what I was trying to make of myself. And, and I think he had a sense that I wanted the relationship to his family to be a long-term deal if possible. So good that he could be comfortable with it. I looked for law jobs in Florida and environmental law, and he was open to having me live with him the summer I was doing my basic searching. Although it was an old cracker fishing shack that got added on to with no air conditioning in Sarasota, it was my home for a summer, and I got to know him better and really solidified the fact that we, weren't just people who had to know each other, but that we like knowing each other a lot. So I was privileged to have that opportunity to deepen that connection. So I wanted to open it up a little bit too and have people talk about how they think these principles may either affect their lives or could affect their lives, because that type of opportunity is never gone from us. If we're alive, and maybe even if we're dead, but I don't know that yet, we have an opportunity to start drawing on the things about our ancestry and the land that can help form our own sense of purpose, our own sense of self, and help develop our sense of place, all of which I think can play into what we do. And it doesn't have to mean that there's some dream thing. It sometimes has to do with integrating those senses into the things you already are doing. Right? Because some of the things that have struck me about being an environmental lawyer in my office, because there's really nobody else who has a background in environmental law in my office, are that my colleagues react to me in certain ways because they know that I want to do what I'm doing, that it's a part of who I am as a lawyer and who I am as a person. And a lot of them have real particular and interesting reactions to it. Generally, a little deeper level of respect for what I'm doing. Because a lot of lawyers are very unhappy people. They didn't really get to doing what they're doing on a day-to-day basis, the actual substance of their job, with a sense of why this is what I want to go do. Some of them do. I want to do criminal defense. Everybody deserves an attorney. I want to do personal injury. People who are injured should get, respected and recompensed adequately. But a lot of people
in many fields,
don't have it.
not just law.
Right.
Mm-hmm. They're not really doing maybe with their heart. Yeah. It's heart fulfilling. It's just like, okay, this is a good paycheck. This is giving me my car and providing for my family, and it is kind of it's a little prickly when you run up against somebody that's like, yeah, I love my job. And so when you do run across somebody who is genuinely happy with what they do to earn their money, some people kind of feel like, well, damn, fuck you. There's that little jealousy thing that they'll have respect, but there's also that little layer of, I feel kind of jealous of you.
I've gotten some of that.
Yeah.
Where people are like, a little...
I'm the person doing that to all the people I know.
Yeah, but I mean...
It's like, you like this? Really?
Right, some careers aren't necessarily obvious that people have a deep connection to, they really like doing. And there's some people who are like, I love doing accounting. I like balancing out the books and telling people what they have and don't have and helping them plan to make it work, right, at a practical level. That's a real service.
I like doing medical billing.
Yeah, right.
I kind of fell into it, but it was more like I had worked retail, which you kind of fall into, right? When you get your first job at McDonald's or something,
It's hard to fall out of retail.
It's hard to get out of retail. And then when I was at Under the Stars studying with Lady Demeter, and Crystal, who eventually was my future boss, said, hey, we're looking for somebody in my office to just do like data entry and, work with numbers. And I'm like, I can do that. And I was like, I really would like to get into the medical field. A, no nights and weekends. B, it's pretty lucrative. And C, you actually feel like you're helping people. And so I really feel like, the doctor I work for, he's great, and he's an oncologist. He works for gynecology oncology. So he deals with women's cancers. So I really feel like I'm making a difference because I'm helping him keep the doors open.
Yep. Yeah, I was going to ask you what that job might mean to you now that you're in it.
Right.
But, you already offered that right up. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
Great perspective.
So, sometimes our missions take us to another place physically. Right, the thing we need to do. The job or career path we have, it might have to take us somewhere. And I think one of the ways to help us ground into a new place and develop a sense of what we're doing does involve getting to know the local place too, and literally in the sense of how do we connect to what we're doing and who we are there. Eat the food, see the place, smell the air, get out a little bit. Other people, in terms of their own way that they relate to their current job or what they'd like to be doing?
Well, I like what I do, but my previous job made me miserable. So I realized that I didn't want to switch careers, but I had to work somewhere where I liked the people, where there was community, where I was happy. And I love my job now. I'm happy. It's work, but when I work hard, I feel like I'm adding value. And, I've grown a lot. And it's just spread to all parts of my life. So it's been really good.
What were you going to say about your grandma?
Oh, my grandmother, she had some really cool stories of when she was young. In Cuba, she had 14 brothers and sisters.
Wow.
And her parents, her dad, was looking for a place where the family could flourish. So, and a career that could support his family. So they moved, I don't know how many times, to different cities and towns, looking for a city where his family could do well. And they moved multiple times. She had memories of packing up this huge family and moving until they finally settled in the city where his family could do well. And a bunch of my grandmother's siblings became accountants. And they were really good at it. And then some of their kids are accountants too. So it was interesting, the journey of, how to make the family flourish. It wasn't just about him.
And there may be, whether nature or nurture or some of both, some inherited sense of what is purposeful about this thing that we're doing. Even if it's to serve our family and to give us security, right? Those are noble purposes, right? Even some people who relate to their job as I'm working to live, I'm not living to work, right? Are absolutely fine, and it can fulfill a sense of what is it that you're doing for yourself, your place, your purpose, all that, family. So,
I had an interesting last few months of career change. Not really career change, but possible career change. I'd been working for a hospital for 7 years, and the hours that I was working were just not in connection with what I needed to do with my family. 6:15 a.m. shift doesn't work when you have to get kids on the bus in the morning. So I started going back to school for teaching, and that was something that I wasn't sure about. I thought I would do pretty well, and was doing pretty well in school, but the salary of a teacher and the work that teachers put in, it was very unnerving to me to be going to school to do that. And when what I do now, I'm a medical lab technologist, has a better salary, So that was a scary thing for me. And then I actually found a job at a drug rehab lab management facility, and I'm doing that now, and they pay very well, and they take very good care of their employees, but the work is mind-numbingly boring. So, do I take that comfort and that knowledge that I'm providing for my family, and that the hours are congruent with what I need in my life, and do I just keep on that path for now, and then wait and do the teaching thing later, or it's kind of not really sure.
Work can be a very large percentage of our life.
It really
Right.
is.
It can make it a challenge if we're just working to get money for something else, because sometimes that something else feels like it can only have a little bit of your life. And if that is the purpose you have, it can be hard to keep that grounded and centered enough as why you're doing this other thing, because it's so much time. But it is it's a hard thing to think through, and sometimes in our culture especially, the idea that you might make a change and earn less money is a really hard one to face, because it's looked at really poorly in general. They're like, you're cutting your own throat here. But if you look at what we do for our living and that much of our time, it's worth thinking about. And I tell people all the time, I could make more money in private practice. I could even be doing environmental law in private practice, but I've had people who pursued me to hire me out of the government job I have. I don't know that I would be happy doing it. Maybe I might, but from what I can tell, I'm going to approach that opportunity very carefully.
Because they might end up wanting you to be on the other side of where you really want to be.
Could be arguing for things that I don't want to support.
Right.
And
That's why it pays more.
And I would be right.
Usually.
I would be hugely careful about making the decision about who I would be employed by and who their clients are if I go out to a private firm or corporation because of that. Because I'm being careful with myself. Right? And there's people who look at me like, what the heck? I mean, how would...
Because they don't
you
have
could
that...
go out and do better.
They don't have that conflict.
But what they don't really understand is I would not do better necessarily there, right?
They have a different idea of better and a different idea of success.
I could very well lose my sense of self.
Right. I had to make that choice. I wanted to be a tax attorney to help out the people getting screwed. And I got my master's in tax, and that very idealistic. I was like, I'm going to help the little guy. And I already had my IT career and finished my master's. I took the LSAT. I was ready to go. And then it dawned on me that I could not have a private practice and do that. I could not survive. I would have to work for the big firms. And the big firms worked for the big corporations. And
they don't work
that
for
was,
the little guy.
They don't work for the little guy. And I was just like, that's going to suck my soul out. I have to sell my soul. And I absolutely do not want that. So I did not go to law school. I did not use my master's. I was just like, I just did this. But I totally did the right thing by not doing that.
Yeah. Sometimes we never know what those endeavors will bring us at the end of the day, though, too. You know, if we look around us at how things model growth themselves, there's virtually no trees that have one trunk and that's it. Mm-hmm. They go off in all kinds of directions, right? Some of them look pretty damn funky, and some of those are the most beautiful ones we run across, even. But, you know, they are still gathering things that might help feed us. There's still things that maybe we just wanted to explore. And you know what? I don't think it's necessarily inherently a bad thing to have made decisions that then don't end up being a big path that you've taken or will continue to take. Right? The way that we're healthy and whole sometimes involves things that we reach out to touch, to learn about, to find out more about. Just like we might with foods, you know, you put them in your mouth sometimes before you know whether or not you're going to eat it again. But it doesn't mean it was necessarily a big mistake to put it in your mouth.
Yeah, you don't have to swallow it just because you put it in your mouth.
That too.
It's okay to spit it back out.
Other folks at all? How do you relate to your, you know, that sense of self? Does it relate to your career? Does it relate to what you want to see for yourself in terms of job or place that you want to live? A lot of people dream about where they want to go more fundamentally than what they want to do. And it's an interesting relation to this whole workshop too. Where do I want to set myself?
Well, one thing I want to set up for my kids, though, is that sense of place, right? And I've been really struck by you and some of the other workshops where people are talking about that sense of place that we need to have. And I remember, you know, as a kid, you know, I grew up on the Severn River up until I was 5 years old with my parents in Maryland, which was amazingly beautiful, catching frogs and all that stuff you're supposed to do when you're a toddler. And then, you know, we were close enough to the river in Port St. Lucie to, you know, get out on the canals and just have my little boat and with my friends and drink Pepsi and listen to heavy metal, like in the trees or whatever. And you know, I'm like, well, that's exactly how it's supposed to be. But my kids don't have that right now. But I have an opportunity to, like in my community at the end of the street, they're building a boat ramp, or they're restoring a boat ramp, and they're doing a really great job with the environmental, with the EPA and the Army Corps of Engineers to do it right. And so I'm like helping those guys out as much as I can. And I'm excited to be able to have my own little boat that I can send my kids off on, you know, go out with them, show them the ways of the water in the local area. And, you know, here's what you do. Just go out and do that, and, you know, stay on touch with the walkie-talkie and, you know, have that sense of place, because I know what it'll grow into. You know, because they don't know what it is yet, but if they have it, then it might spark something on the way back. Mm-hmm. I think it's cool. Nice. Make sure that happens.
Yeah, I was able to find out with some of my family background that my family was, even with my dad's side of the family being like in a relatively stable area for hundreds of years, that they also got out and about a fair amount. My grandfather apparently came down to Everglades City during Prohibition to run liquor back up to Myrtle Beach. You know? And
Because it was lucrative.
as I talked to my dad about his, I'm sure a lot of people said so, yeah. And we're glad he made it back. You know, for him, actually, part of the purpose of doing that really was serving a community thing there that people were gonna do.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I had to check myself at one point in terms of understanding kind of part of who I am. My dad is a very kind, stable person who, you know, he can get angry from time to time, but he really is like this, you know, basically good guy that in almost every kind of good guy way you'd think of a person to be, you know, involved with his church and his family and all this whole 9 yards. And at one point, when we would go to visit my grandparents, we'd be driving down from, I was born in the Catskills in New York. My dad had moved up there for work with IBM, and then as I've been moved. So my sense of place has been very, in some ways, pretty dispersed. So the reason I think I've worked on having this sense of place is because it wasn't always happening easily for me. I had some here and some there and some the next place as we went. But we'd drive to see my grandparents, and my grandmother would always be sitting on the porch when we arrived. There wasn't cell phones. She didn't know when we were about to make it. She generally knew when we were going to leave and about when we were going to arrive. She would sit on that porch waiting for us to come. And somehow, I don't think she sat there all day, but, you know. But she was always there. And I got out of the car one time and went up to her. I was pretty young, but I'd gotten taller than she was. She was only about 5'2". And she gave me a big hug, and then she kind of did one of these, holds me by the shoulders and looks up at me a little bit like this, and looks me up and down, and says, "You're going to be like your Grandpa John," who was my dad's biological father, who passed away when he was 11, so I didn't have a direct relationship with this guy. She says, "You're going to be like your Grandpa John, big hands and big feet." Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it turns out the grandfather, I didn't know that she had married as a cousin of his, and they grew up together, so Don and John knew each other really, really well, and probably not a whole lot of light between them in terms of who they are. But I got curious. I'm like, well, who is this guy? Right? My grandmother says I'm going to be just like him, and so when I interviewed my dad some and recorded it about his life and his background, I found out more like, you know, he ran liquor from Everglades City, and I'd asked my grandmother at one point. She said, "Well, he's a bit of a man about town." He liked to shoot pool and drink, and you know, but he held the job and brought in some money. But it was a hard life. She worked at a fish camp some south of Myrtle Beach, and my dad even lived with him at the fish camp some summers because there's more food to eat if you're working at a fish camp. You know, it was in some ways a better place to be as a kid, even though it was a working camp. So, but that knowing who my grandfather was broadened, and I think helped me understand my own sense of self in that regard. And I had to stop and think a little bit about, well, these may not be activities that my dad would respect all that much. Although my dad's first job was being a rack boy in a pool hall, maybe because that's where his dad was going. So, you know, even though my dad does not really cut up at all, like virtually at all, I know it's part of my family. I know it's some of my family have been cads and, you know, criminals and things like that at points. And, you know, part of my history isn't that somehow we're all, you know, the Paladin of characters in our modern age or something. And neither is that necessary to be a good person overall. I know we're getting a little close on time, but is there other stuff people want to share about their own ideas about where place and purpose and self, you know, lead into their own development? I really like that you're working on that, by the way, Joe, because, you know, whether or not they, you know, you can tell them, tell yourself what's developing for them, I think it's inextricable. Right. Even moving virtually every 2 to 5 years when I was younger, I think I actually learned how to develop a sense of place, in part because I had to. Right. Otherwise, I was going to feel really disconnected. Mm-hmm. Really disconnected.
I had a similar experience growing up with my father in the military, and then when he got out of the military, went to work for a civilian company connected to the military, and I don't think I lived anywhere more than 5 years until I was probably about 26 or 27. And yeah, that sense of adjusting very quickly to wherever it is I lived became like I had to do it fast. And fortunately, my mom liked to go out in nature. She liked to go out hiking and trail walking and bird watching. And so she and I we'd just get in the car. We'd move to a new place, just get in the car and drive around. Oh, let's stop here. Let's stop here. Oh, there's a national forest. Let's go over here. But it had to happen quick, because in 2 years we might be living somewhere that looked completely different, had a different cultural vibe. It could have been a complete one. Yeah, but South Florida is the only place that I ever really had a sense of permanent place, because my grandparents were here, and so it's like more home to me. But even on my phone, when I have on the weather stuff, I have Boise on there, and I have several places in North Carolina, and I have a place in Virginia, and I have like a couple places overseas that I keep track of the weather, because these are all places that I've lived, because I feel kind of connected to them still. You know, I'm like, I really don't need to know what the weather is like in Morocco, but I do.
Right, and how could you not actually have it? That in some ways, that connection with land and the sense of place, even if we're not aware of it, is inevitable, right?
And sometimes it's not even because you yourself have lived there, like you were saying it in Ancestry. When Sarah and Douglas went to Salem for Merry Meet in 2013, she came home and said to me that Douglas told her that's where he was going to live.
Yeah, he felt that.
He felt so connected to New England. And my family my mother's side especially, has been in New England for a long time. And New York, New England area, and my dad's side is Pennsylvania Dutch, which is actually Amish, which is actually German. But and his family comes over from like middle or the West Coast. But she came home and said, now she moved from when she was 5. She doesn't really remember, you know. But Douglas has never been there. And he was like, oh, I feel so home here.
And feeling that connection to that call doesn't necessarily mean that's the only place that you could or should be, right? One of the interesting things about having a connection with the land and ancestry is sometimes you know how diverse the background really is, how far across the world your roots go. And I think in trying to help us develop a sense of ourselves and our place and our purpose along the way, it's really useful to actually let yourself have the elbow room, because sometimes it's not clear and you can't force it. You can't force yourself to know, you know. It's like trying to force wisdom.
But I've actually been to places that I know I can't live.
Well, that's a good caution. It is. It's
when we went out to Reno, when we went out to Arizona, my whole being was like, oh, you don't really want to stay here long. I need green. I can't really do brown and dry.
I'm the opposite. Wherever it's green, I'm like, no, it gets too cold and it rains too much. Whereas if something's like kind of dry and not deserty, but more mountainousy and dry,
yeah,
I'm like, okay, is there a lot of wild rosemary? If there's lots of wild rosemary and it's brown, I can probably live there.
I'm on a bit of a terrifying journey because I told you a little bit about this last night, how I had always wanted to be an actress since I was like, the first movie I ever remember seeing, and I think the first movie I ever really saw and connected with was The Wizard of Oz, and I was 3, and I would go around making my parents call me Dorothy, but I also had an imaginary friend named Dorothy. I don't know how that worked out, but I just remember always loving movies and wanting to be an actress. And I did acting in high school and college, but I had some experiences that really disillusioned me, and I didn't feel like, I guess I felt like a lot of like trauma, you know, whenever I thought about going and auditioning and doing those things. So I like let 10 years go by, and I was on this path of becoming a counselor eventually. I knew, you know, I always wanted to do something to help people, and I didn't know exactly what. So I thought, oh, I'll be a counselor, you know. and I'm in grad school for counseling, and a friend of mine went through this personal growth training called gratitude training, and she was like, this is changing my life, you've got to do it. And I was like, well, I'm a therapist, so I don't need that. Like, I'm already learning all that stuff. She's like, trust me, do it. So I go, and it's like this experiential process that has you break through stuff way faster than you ever could in therapy. So I had the courage finally, and the clarity of like, this is what I'm meant to do. And I know it's terrifying, and I know it's crazy to just go and move to LA and be an actress and you haven't acted in 10 years, but that's what I'm doing.
Right.
So it's been about a year since I like really was gonna go, and I've been working on getting the money to go, and some opportunities are finally falling in place. And I've had some acting classes, and I'm just like taking it little by little. But I don't want to live in LA. I think it's probably like the worst place on earth. I haven't actually even been there, but from what I hear, it sounds horrible. But the surrounding area will be nice, and I know I'll carve out like a nice space for myself. But it's scary to be going on this journey knowing like you're probably gonna hate it. There's gonna be lots of rejection. You're a very sensitive girl. This is like probably the worst possible thing you could do, but I know I'll never be satisfied unless I just keep chipping away at that path. And so it's terrifying, and it's emotional, and there's a lot of fear, but I'm just gonna keep going for it anyway, because now that I've discovered this about myself, that's my purpose, and that's like the flow for me. So I can't live another life and be happy. And I might be unhappy living this one too on the way. It'll be worth it.
One thing I'll leave you with, because I think we got to wrap up so we can do closing ritual and get ourselves all to our other homes, is that if you're having real need to work on this, to figure out what is it that I could be doing, I don't know how to find that direction. Y'all may have been in ritual where I did a similar thing in my Hearn workshop, where you can let yourself feel that the breathing of the land itself, and let yourself settle down into it some, because wherever you are, the spirit of that place knows the spirit of other places too. If you're thinking about a new place you might be trying to go, or something you do want to grow for yourself in the place where you are, I think it's useful. And you can connect it with going to sleep and dreaming if you want, because there's some connections there that arise that we can't think through. We can't plan out, because this isn't all an intellectual endeavor by any means. Right? The things that you understand that feed you well or that drive you forward are not always obvious to your brain. They can become clear, but we have to allow ourselves taking some steps that don't end up being a path totally, and it's worth investing a little time in nurturing what that means to grow your sense of self and grow your sense of purpose, and doing it in the place you may live most, at least currently, or in a place that you find really beautiful and that calls you, whether it's this land or another place that you can visit. If you need to get outside an urban area to a place where you feel like I can connect now, that's great. But you may even be able to do it when you're getting ready to go to sleep. Right? The land's underneath you wherever you are. Even if you're way up in a skyscraper, it's down there. Mm-hmm. If not, you'd fall a long ways. Long ways. So, it's going to uphold you wherever you're at, and getting, taking the time for yourself to plant some of the seeds of what is it? How will this look? What is it that I need to be preparing for? What are the things that go into growing this well? You may get a little more clarity and a little more clarity over time about what that looks like and what steps you can be taking. So I appreciate y'all coming and sharing stuff and just listening to what this might mean. Getting ready for sleep, by the way, is also a great time if you want to reach out to see whether or not your ancestors have something to say about where you're going, or if you want to understand a little bit better about who you are. Because when we hit that dream time, if you can take a moment when you wake up to say, what was that? Even if you didn't really have vivid dreaming, giving yourself a little self-check-in, especially if you're going to sleep with certain kinds of intent, is a good practice that, may help show you things that really are interesting about what it is that you can do to grow that yourself. So, thanks very much, folks.
Thank you.
And I hope you all have safe travels home.
Thanks. You too.
Hello, EMLC podcast listeners. I'm Marla Robertson, a member of EMLC and the workshop coordinator for Mystic South. Our conference highlights the southern flair and mystic spirit of our own part of the country, be it witch, pagan, heathen, or hoodoo, and the various flavors that exist in between and beyond all those. Please join us in Atlanta, July 13th through 15th. You can find out information on our headliners, workshops, and our academic track at our website at mysticsouth.com. That's MYSTIC-SOUTH.com.
Hi, how's everyone out there tonight? I want to tell you a story about a paladin, but first I got to tell you what a paladin is. Now, paladins, in ancient days, they were holy knights for the church. Yes, they were. They were holy knights for the church. They were badasses on the battlefield, aye, indeed, and they took all these incredible vows of purity and chastity and nobility, and aye, everyone wanted the paladin on their side in the middle of the battlefield, but nobody wants to hang out with the paladin after the war because they're just killjoys, don't you know? So, this is a song about a paladin who is considering a career change. Call me sir, I wear the white. I'm the champion of all that's right. Noble heart and steady sight. I am a paladin. The monks that raised me had no mother. Bible in one hand, a blade in the other. Live like a saint, the church is my lover. I am a paladin. But oh, so many nights in prayer in chapel, begging, please, there must be a better reason to get splinters in my knees. Paladin Shmaladin, I wanna be a pirate. I wanna swash my buckle and explore my darker side. And if the lady's willing, gonna rip that bodice wide. I'm gonna trade my blade for a cutlass and get my swarthy on. Paladin Shmaladin, I wanna be a pirate. Ooh, all this living sinless is so incredibly dull. I want a tankard of the sweetest ale and drink my belly full. I wanna trade my golden crucifix for crossbones and a skull. Paladin Shmaladin, I wanna be a pirate. Oh, I can hear the brothers say, be happy with your lot. Oh, but how I want to be everything I'm not. Paladin Shmaladin, I wanna be a pirate. So pillage, loot, and plunder, oh baby, I'm all in. I'm so ready to accept the consequences of my sin. Embrace my inner pirate and slay the paladin. Paladin Shmaladin, I wanna be a pirate. Hey, you've gone with me this far. Let's have a little pirate rap. Are you ready? So black the truth and patch the eye. I wanna be that wicked guy. I'm ready for the 7 seas and a right fine wench to sail with me. CHASTE, that's not the chaste I wanna be. Let my heart grow black as coal. Sex and drugs and rock and roll. Paladin Shmaladin, I wanna be. Paladin Shmaladin, I wanna be. Paladin Shmaladin, I wanna be a pirate. Sing it with me one more time, nice and slow, you know, like the pirates do. We're gonna take it out here. Here we go. Paladin Shmaladin, I want to be. Wait for it. 1, 2, 3, 4. A pirate!
Where's my rum?